Hello, I'm Anthony. Today we're going to take a pretty detailed look at comping vocals in Cubase. I think this is one of the parts of songwriting that takes the longest for me. Part of that is because it's so important to get it right. If there are vocals in a song, they're usually the most important element of the song, and you want to get them absolutely right. They're organic, they're sung by a human, but they're going to need correction. So you've constantly got those really fine balanced decisions to make. Do you fix something? Do you leave it alone? Or let the organic nature of the performance come through? But also the way that Pauline and I go about recording vocals is that I will literally just press record, and then she essentially learns the song on the fly, which means there's an awful lot of stuff that needs to get deleted. If, for instance, I just zoom in on one section of the song, you can see just how many takes we go through, and where we have this _05, that's all the same take, looping round and round and just basically doing take after take after take. Just as a technical point, if you see any gaps in the take numbers, say a big difference between like take 5 and take 10, that could be traffic going past the window and ruining the take. Pauline might forget the words. I might cough, chair might squeak. There are any number of reasons why stuff just gets thrown away on one pass. Literally any artifact that I hear in the sound that corrupts the take at all just gets insta deleted. So what you're seeing here is stuff that's past that. There is no way that this take is making it onto the song test. And now we have to actually start listening to the music to figure out whether or not it's going to get in. Just a bit of a broader discussion about the song itself before we actually embark on the deep dive. This is a song that we already had a vocal line for. In fact, I've done an entire episode where I showcased this vocal and I thought I was happy with it. There was something niggling in the back of my mind. I knew it wasn't right, but I'd put so much effort into getting the vocals recorded I didn't want to admit it. We've gone back and re-recorded it, and I'm going to show you why over the course of this video. But I'll put a link to the original episode so that you can hear the full song as it was with the original vocal sung. So that's the VOC track, and then the duplicated track down here is everything we did on the second pass where we've got the new vocals recorded. Now there are two problems with the original recording as was. The first problem was with the control panel settings. If I turn me off, there's an insert here which is like a Neve emulation, but there used to be a denoiser, a de-esser and a compressor on there as well, and they were way too aggressive. The reason they were there in the first place is because I used to have the PC in this room with me and it was just so loud. I needed to do something to suppress this massive constant hum in the background. I've since moved my PC into a different room and the room is fundamentally quite quiet now. Unfortunately, I live next to a busy main road, so lots and lots of takes get ruined by some truck driving past. There's nothing I can do that. I'm not going to build a soundproof room. The second problem we had with this take was that it was our first attempt. So I present Pauline with the lyrics, she learns them on the fly, records them in that session, and sometimes it works, sometimes we get it right first time. With this case, she didn't really sink in to the song. And so while she was singing absolutely fine, we had these two problems. One, the denoiser was being too aggressive, you'll hear that shortly. And two, she didn't really emotionally connect with the song and you could hear that. So let's now start A-Bing between these two versions and try to catch some of that stuff. So I've cycled around a single phrase here. I've made it 9 bars just to give a little bit of space on both sides. And I've soloed the vocals so that we can hear exactly what was happening with the vocal performance. This is the original.
And the deceptions that whisper like heathens.
It might not be immediately obvious what's wrong with the take, but it's dull, it's flat. The denoiser has basically stripped all of the life out of the performance. I also did happen to change one of the words in this performance. I'll just de-solo it. Deceptions is going to turn into reflections, and that's because the word was just too sibilant in the context of the song. Let's take all the solo off and hear that as it is.
And the deceptions that whisper like heathens.
Just a little bit too much sibilance in the song. So let's now solo into the next vocal track. And at this point in this section of the analysis, I'm not actually comparing between different vocal takes. You can see that I've already selected the one that I'm going to take a little bit later over here. I'm going to show you different versions of vocal takes and how we go about choosing the best one. But just for now, let's hear the difference in those two performances.
and the reflections that whisper like heathens.
Okay, there's much more air to the sound. It's a much more lively, active performance.
And the reflections that whisper like heathens.
You just hear all of those upper frequencies that have been suppressed by the denoiser. The PC fan was just massively loud across a very broad spectrum, so when I was letting the denoiser listen to it and suppress those frequencies, there was just so much collateral damage. At the time, there was nothing I could do about it. Now I'm having to go back and considering doing a lot of re-recording of a lot of vocals that will just get better if I do them again. Well, I mean, it's self-evident, isn't it? You want to get it as good as possible. But the important thing to note is that it's really easy to convince yourself that what you've got is good enough. So here's example number 2.
Was that a glint in your eye? What do you know? And like a dusting of snow, there goes the fever.
Okay, the sung performance is absolutely fine. There is nothing wrong with that vocal performance. But the one that we got a few days ago is significantly better in both respects, in both the audio fidelity itself and the emotional performance that Pauline puts in. So listen to the different emphasis that she's putting on the song now that she's learned it and she's fully internalised what she's singing.
Was that a glint in your eye? What do you know? And like a dusting of snow, there goes the fever.
Let's bring the song in.
Was that a glint in your eye? What do you know?
So this is the original.
And like a dusting of snow, there goes the fever.
Now the new one.
Was that a glint in your eye? What do you know? And like a dusting of snow, there goes the fever.
She's starting to play with the timing structure of the song. She's no longer bang, 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 because that's how you learn the piece of music in the first place. My guide piano vocal, which is over here, was fully quantized. It's just telling her these are the points at which you put your anchors. Once you've learned the song, then you start putting that emotional interpretation on, and it just absolutely transforms the piece. It's so dramatic that I'm actually considering never keeping the first take anymore, apart from just a reference work to say, right, well, that's our ground zero. Now, what can we do to improve it? Because you just don't know how good things are going to get if you let the artist. I said to Pauline, don't worry about the quantization. Take the guide vocal away. You just sing, however you feel. And over the various takes that you'll see shortly, you can hear her just playing with those timings, pulling it forwards or backwards, and eventually finding one that just absolutely sits perfectly in the song. Another decision point you've got to make when you're comping a song is how much you cut it up. So here we've got a phrase, I'll solo it again.
Let them fade in the sun, drifting down rivers unknown.
Okay, so I could comp that entire thing as one phrase, switch to a new take, and just leave it running.
Let them fade in the sun, drifting down rivers unknown.
And compare each of those phrases together.
Let them fade in the sun, drifting down rivers unknown.
Or I could cut them up. If I zoom in, that's actually really two phrases. So I could quite easily cut those up. And I've not interfered with any single vocal take. So if you can basically zoom into a point where there's complete silence on every single take, then it's always safe to cut there. And now we can comp each of those parts separately.
Let them fade in the sun. Let them fade in the sun. Let them fade in the sun.
The second pass of comping, after you've thrown away the stuff that's clearly wrong, generally because it's got some sort of artifact in the recording, is to start finding stuff that isn't immediately obvious. So on the word sun, for instance, some of Pauline's sibilant sounds break up. She's got this feature of her voice where if she puts a little bit too much energy into it, it distorts. And there's an example here on the one that we're listening to.
Let them fade in the sun.
You can hear on the sun, there's kind of a crackle. That's actually her voice. Now, I'm really careful to strip too much of this stuff out because Pauline has an absolutely wonderful voice, and some of those artifacts are an intrinsic feature of her sound. So it's really a question of, I can't do anything about the thing itself, that's a fundamental component of the sound, but it's like you've basically got this variable saturation knob on her voice, and I now have to listen to the various takes to decide how much of that effect I want in the sound.
Let them fade in the sun.
So it's still quite prominent there. I might go to the extent of really zooming in quite tight. You can't get so tight that it's the only thing you're hearing. It completely destroys your ears if you do that. But I can zoom in a little bit more.
In the sun, in the sun, in the sun, in the sun.
There you go. So that's a take. That's an example of a take where the distortion is entirely absent.
In the sun.
So now I can listen to that entire piece to see, well, if I don't want any of that effect in the sound, is this the take I want? Is everything else about it fine?
Let them fade in the sun.
Sounds pretty good. Now there's a visual test that we can perform on the audio. So I've brought up the audio itself, and if I zoom to locators, I'm going to catch this selected version of the take. Don't forget, there are many versions of the recorded audio in this single audio event, and I'm basically selecting my window of perspective. So I have to select the correct event in the main viewer in order to see it in the lower view. And what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the audio to see whether or not there are any obvious problems that I'm going to have when I come to do any vari audio processing I might want to do on it.
Let them fade in the sun.
So the word "the" is very harmonically active, but it might be okay. I don't think there's a problem there. The examples of kind of problems that I'm looking for are erratic vibrato. Right at the very end, there's a very erratic vibrato, but does it sound good?
Sun.
Yes, it does.
Let them fade in the sun.
So I've got absolutely no problem with her raising in pitch there because it sounds good. So take 11-7 is now a candidate for the best take. What I'll very commonly do if I found a take that I like, and you need to make sure that your grid relative is on in order to do this, is put it onto lane number 1. So whatever it is in lane number 1, I'll move out of the way, and then I'll put my favourite at the top. So if I zoomed out the entire song and ensured that lane 1 for all of these takes was the selected one, then it's going to play as if there are no other takes in the song. I can still carry on auditioning. The next thing I want to do is see if there is any vari audio processing I want to do on it. For instance, this A might come down a little bit. I'm just going to shift click to drag it down a tiny bit, but really that's the kind of stuff that, to be absolutely honest with you, I would usually just leave alone. The rest of the performance is absolutely fine.
Let them fade in the sun. Let them fade in the sun.
And there we've got our take. So that's that section, that's that phrase done. Another feature that I'm always on the lookout for in these vocal takes is the idiosyncrasies of the singer. Now, one of Pauline's is that she will do big sweeping portamentos into the beginnings of phrases, and it's absolutely wonderful. Sometimes you don't want it quite so dramatic, sometimes you do. The event I've got highlighted here, she basically starts singing the note more or less pitch perfect.
Drifting, drifting,
There's a little bit of an inflection there, but this version
drifting.
has a much bigger, much more accentuated lead in, and in this case I like it. That's what we want.
Drifting down.
You can actually see it in vari audio come sweeping up the frequency curve. So let's hear that in context.
Drifting down rivers unknown.
As opposed to
Drifting down rivers
Okay, so I'm going to keep that one. I'll zoom into locators, and now I'm just eyeballing it in Vari Audio, see if there's any issues. With this particular note, she's gone slightly pitchy before she comes back to nail it, so I'm just going to pull that down a little bit. Always making sure that I don't ruin the performance. You've got to be really careful and sensitive with this stuff.
Down rivers unknown.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Drifting down.
This note's a bit high. Just bring that whole thing down a bit.
Drifting down rivers unknown.
I'm not going to do anything with that sound, with that note, because it just sounds so good. Even though visually it might look a bit all over the place, it doesn't matter, it sounds good.
Drifting down rivers unknown.
Yeah, completely happy with that. This next phrase has an example of an artifact that got past the first filter, but actually there is a problem with it. If we focus in on take 5 V5,
Heading for morning.
there's a car pulling away in the section in the last part of this phrase.
For morning. For morning.
There's just that hum in the background of the traffic pulling away from the traffic lights. They're actually in the process of building a bypass, which will be finished next year, that will basically take the vast majority of the traffic away from the front of my house and just route it about 300 yards that way for almost no reason. I have no idea why they're doing it, but I'm not complaining. So this is one of those that, yes, my initial take when I was listening to the whole song, or even in isolation, just in solo, I didn't hear the fact that there was a car pulling away. So that's no good, it's got to go. Then we've got the vibrato effect. Pauline has fabulous natural vibrato, but very little control over when it actually appears. It's totally instinctive, and this is one of the reasons why we do multiple takes, so that she can basically give her voice an opportunity to do what it does best, and then it's just up to me to catch the right one. So here we've got a phrase where sometimes on the word home she sings it flat, and sometimes she sings it with vibrato, and I need to pick the one that sounds the best.
Somehow I found my way home.
A little bit on the home right at the end. Let's hear this one. And the reason I'm selecting the event is so that we can see it as well.
Somehow I found my way home.
Okay, nice enough.
Somehow I found my way home.
There we go. There we go. See, it starts off subtle and then it just ramps up. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's now a candidate. I might move that to the top of the lane. Let's listen to some of the others.
Somehow I found my way home. Somehow I found my way home.
That was a good one. Can't remember which ones we've heard. Let's do the bottom two.
Somehow I found my way home. Somehow I found my way home.
Now take 5/5 was the one that I liked the best.
Somehow I found my way home.
From the vibrato perspective, but we've got that little bit of distortion at the beginning. So this is one of those situations where I had one phrase that felt like it was a single phrase, but now I'm going to chop it up to see if I can find the best bits out of two separate sections and whether or not they work together. And I'm going to zoom in to the point where I can find a clean cut. Make sure that snap's not on so that I've got complete control over where the cut is. I'll say there. Take 4 has no distortion and it sounds really pure.
Somehow I...
So now I can add that to the beautiful vibrato of this take over here, join those two together and see if they work.
Somehow I found my way home.
And absolutely they do. So that's my winner. If you're wondering why I'm not committing this stuff to memory and I'm just deleting the rest of them, it's because I might want to double up some of these harmonies, some of these issues which are obvious when they're absolutely front dead center. If it's the second or third harmony as a background like thickening effect, it can be absolutely fine and not be a problem. So I've moved them up onto lane 1 now, so that's now my master take.
Somehow I found my way home.
And don't forget, we also need to do a little bit of a sanity check in Vari Audio just to make sure that everything's clean there. This D sharp, for instance, is a little bit pitchy, so I'll just pull that down a tiny bit. Again, I don't want everything absolutely perfect. Perfect is not perfect.
Somehow I...
There we go. And now, in the context of the song,
Somehow I found my way home.
great stuff. Look at that big vibrato wobble at the end. Brilliant. Love that stuff. Not going to do anything with that. And so this is why comping vocals takes so long. I've shown you really small examples of really small processes on single takes out of maybe 10. So the amount of time it takes to choose the best version, make sure that it's capable of being edited, there's nothing in there that's going to cause you difficulty when you come to either Vari Audio or occasionally Audio Warp. I try to make sure that vocals are recorded exactly as we want them in time, and I very rarely do audio warping either way, unless I'm doing harmony. If I was going to cluster 5 or 6 different vocals together, I might want them all to start and end similarly, just to make sure that it really tightens the effect up. But for the lead melody like this, you know, you want to keep it as organic as possible and let Pauline play with time, you know, as guided by her emotional response to the music. That'll do us for today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit the like button, and I'll see you for the next one. Thanks a lot.